So thank you for coming today, everyone. Leigh McGee, I've known all of my life. She is from Stillwell, born and raised, and so glad to have you today, Leanne, and so excited about your session on well-being in the community. And so we're happy to have you, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tammy. Thanks so much for being with me throughout this. Even though I know we'll see you disappear, I know you're there, and you're such a wonderful host. I want to thank the community and cultural outreach team, which Tammy is a big part of. Brad Wagnon, Savannah Smith, well, many others. They're gracious hosts, and they're very organized in how they work with those of us that are provide information and come in and co-host some of these sessions. They're just wonderful to work with. So thank you. I want to welcome all of you all out there, the Cherokee Nation communities, and I'm delighted to be here to talk about this very important subject, well-being in the community. How is your life going? Such an important question, and we forget to stop and ask that of ourselves and ask of it of others. People may think that this is a presentation and information on wellness. This encompasses wellness, but it's bigger, and so we're going to actually get into that. When Tammy and the group asked me to participate and let me know that the overarching theme was living in balance, two big things came to mind, and the two go together. It's using your strengths every day, which is at the center of having a purposeful life. And having a purposeful life is at the center of well-being. And so I hope by the time we come full circle at the end of the hour, you will see how those things come together. Without knowing our strengths and using our strengths every day to have a purposeful life, our well-being becomes in jeopardy. And so we'll talk about that. So you can start to see the fullness of this. Well-being in the community, asking the question and doing something about your answer of how is your life going? It adds years to life and life to years. This should be the global model or motto of well-being. So adding years to life and life to years. I'm Leigh McGee. Like Tammy said, we've known each other forever. I'm from Adair County. Right now, my home is in the Lion Switch community, but grew up in the Oak Grove community. And it was really in working at the Center for Tribal Studies years ago for Dr. Neil Morton that I realized the importance of communities and started to grow in my awareness and knowledge. And then I had the fortune of meeting Chief Wilma Mankiller and working for her for several years at the very end of her term in office. And then for a few years after that, getting to stay in close touch and learning from her about Cherokee communities and the importance, and that Cherokee communities are the front line of the Cherokee Nation. And I never thought about it that way. And so when you think about wellness and well-being, it is our Cherokee communities that are in the front line for well-being. So it's such an important subject, and delighted to be talking about it. The Gallup organization I was introduced to years ago through my last subject matter, which is Clifton Strengths and working in strengths. And so in my training that I do with Gallup, I find out more and more and always learning, and well-being has been at the center of their studies for years and years. And so I'll introduce you to information, a couple of books, and that I hope will be very, very helpful to you. OCO Group, we're in our 19th year of business. When January rolls around, we'll be in our 20th year. And I still feel, I don't know, I just learn and enjoy working with Native communities, tribes, and tribally owned businesses. That's where we spend the majority of our time working all over. Well-being is something that organizations and governments, they just didn't talk about all that much for, I would say, 17, 18 years, let's say 17, of working in a big way with tribal governments and tribal organizations. And I think it was the pandemic that made it front and center. And that conversation moved very quickly from health and wellness to quality of life and well-being. And I had never thought about the difference. And it's just been a real joy, even though in trying times, to talk with people, to learn with people, and grow an awareness of the fullness of well-being. So today, we'll talk about what is well-being, and I'll compare and contrast with wellness and well-being. And why does it matter? And it really is shocking that it wasn't even a bigger subject matter before the pandemic. It took a pandemic to put this on our big time radar screen. We're going to talk about some metrics that are there, but metrics that aren't there, because this really is well-being coming into the fullness of what it is, why it should be on our radar screens, why it should never drop off, and that we do need to have better measurements / metrics for how we're doing as individuals, as teams, as organizations, as communities, as tribal nations. Okay. Community organizations are the first line or the front line to impact well-being of employees, of those who live in the community, and of those who volunteer for the organization. Okay, so anyway, let's just jump in there. I have a couple of introduction slides. The first is to talk about Gallup a little bit and some of the numbers to hopefully grab your attention. Gallup has a book that came out last year, and I'll talk about it a little bit more. Again, I don't work for Gallup. I'm not selling any of their products, but they're very informative to the work that we do in Native communities. And I just find them very, very helpful, and thought that some of you might as well. This is their latest book, Wellbeing at Work. In fact, it was one of the large organizations that we work with that introduced it to me and said, hey, can we talk about this at our visioning and strategic planning session? We want to talk about well-being. And so it was just eye-opening for me. The very first page of the book says, what if, so it asks the question, what if the next global crisis is a mental health pandemic? And the response is, it is here now. Gallup scientists have studied well-being for 70 plus years. Why some people live longer than others, why some people are happier than others or more content in their lives. During the beginning of the pandemic, Gallup decided to, they already had a book out maybe 10 years earlier about well-being, but they decided to write about it again and make it more front and center and add additional information to it. How were people doing during the pandemic? Okay, so Gallup decided to gather this data and talk about the impact that it was having on people's lives. The current state of suffering globally has risen significantly since the pandemic. The US Census reports that their findings are one third of Americans are showing signs of clinical anxiety and depression, which is a huge jump from just before the pandemic started. So very big jump. In a question about depressed mood, the percentage of Americans who reported symptoms have doubled since 2014. So Gallup has found historic increases in stress and worry. This is in our workplaces. This is in our communities. This is in our community organizations. And so it's not to be a downer at all. It's just to be aware and to give ourselves a break too. Because we all do it. I think we all get to thinking, oh man, we're leaders in our communities, we're leaders in our organization, etc. And we've got to be the ones out there always helping to pull everybody forward and not show signs of anxiety, not show signs of stress. And yet we're human beings. And so I hope that during this session and in your thoughts and takeaway and how you use and continue to research and utilize the information is to build you up, certainly not to take you down. But this information is about awareness. Okay. And so some of it, is going to feel like, whoa, that was heavy. Other parts I hope are uplifting because there's ways to look at the information and to do something about it. Okay. And so I hope in the end that you feel very uplifted. Besides the pandemic, though, I don't want to minimize the situation that we're in. And Gallup doesn't either, and any other of the big organizations that write, like the Mayo Clinic, about well-being, about the World Health Organization. It's that the pandemic is not happening in isolation. There are economic crises going on all over the world. And so there's that. There's also huge, enormous social changes going on. So add that. So it creates a lot of anxiety. Any one of these big things would be enough, but you put them all together and it's a lot. I do want to say something about that wild graphic. I was looking for a visual for this chart, and I'm so thankful that I ran into this. This is a young artist. He simply was responding at his mother's request to participating in a county competition that is done every year in New York for their I Voted sticker. And he's a 14-year-old kid. And so he told his mom, okay, I'll do it. And so he turned this in. They have had over 158,000 people voted in this competition. And I think 132,000, I read, voted this one first. So this won the competition. I voted. I think it's fascinating that this 14-year-old, this is his quote, politics right now in the world is all kinds of crazy. And I feel like the creature that I drew kind of resembles the craziness of politics and the world right now. And so I thought, man, that really is how I sometimes feel like, wow, this is what it's like right now. And how are we going to handle it and handle it in a way that we help people versus hurt people, that we help ourselves versus hurt ourselves. And so I just thought this young kid did a phenomenal job. One other thing, this is also from Gallup's study. They study, I think on a daily basis, but very often, the positive experiences around the world and the negative experiences. And by the way, those of you that are researchers, you can Google just that. Gallup studies on positive experiences and negative experiences, and it'll pop right up. They know that emotionally, the second year of the pandemic has been even a tougher year on the world. And that people are, well, we'll talk about this later, but people are experiencing around the globe. I don't know necessarily in the US, every country is different. Some countries are, it's so sad how much negative experience that they're having. And then others like New Zealand, I think they have the most positive experience. But globally, we're having more negative experiences than positive. And that's starting to happen more and more. And I think the last decade, Gallup has watched that increase. If leaders in the world, leaders in our communities, don't focus on overall well-being, and we're going to look at what that is. The question is, who will? And I thought that's a huge, huge question. And I think it's an important one. Who will? Well-being must be everyone's investment. And we're looking at universities, we're looking at large institutions, and we're looking at small communities that are saying, you know, this isn't one part of the organization's work, it's all of our work. And there's nothing that comes outside of well-being. It's all about well-being. So the big question is, how is your life going? Let's look at how to answer that. First of all, let's look at what is well-being and why does it matter? I'm just going to peel back the word a little bit in the global discussion, okay? Let's do a bit of a compare and contrast of well-being and wellness. Wellness, there are different definitions for it, but this is one that you'll see pretty often. Wellness is the quality or state of being healthy in body and mind, especially as a result of deliberate effort. Okay, so it's very health focused, body and mind. Okay, well-being takes on a bigger focus. It is wellness, body and mind, but it's also having a good or satisfactory condition of our overall existence. Gallup puts it into how we experience life. It's our state characterized by health, happiness, and prosperity. And you'll see that prosperity doesn't mean how much money you make, okay? Just it's what do you see as a prosperous life, and are you living it? So well-being encompasses wellness, but it's broader. Okay, it brings even more meaning to our contemporary world and lives. It helps us conceptualize and see ourselves and others as a whole person. And so let's look at that. We're moving from wellness to well-being. It's helping organizations and communities see that it is the big picture, see it in its fullness. I liked this, and so I kept it. This I just found in research with what universities were doing, because our universities we depend on to be big research institutions. So not just Gallup is studying it, but also Mayo Clinic has a fantastic website about wellness and what they're doing. They have a fantastic assessment. But this is from the National Association of Student Personnel Administrators, but also the National Intramural and Recreational Sports Association. They came together and they put out this, that by focusing on the whole person, the whole educational experience, the whole institution, the whole community, well-being becomes a multifaceted goal and a shared responsibility for the entire campus. And so I thought the reason I wanted to use this is that I think all organizations and all tribal governments should be looking at the same, that the goal shouldn't just be put in one part of the organization. It should be throughout the organization, should have well-being goals and should be have objectives set that we're reaching results toward overall well-being in every part of what we do. So I just wanted to put that out there. I also, in the introduction, thought of wellness is adding years to life. Well-being is adding life to years. Well, that was just my thought in the opening, and I wrote it down to say it, but that helps you kind of differentiate between the two. Those of you that like to research things, I wanted you to know there's other things out there, of course, besides Gallup, but these are two books out there, Wellbeing and Wellbeing at Work. By the way, a lot of organizations put the hyphen in there. Gallup does not. I think I was consistent throughout to not put the hyphen, but same thing, well-being. Gallup first wrote about well-being in 2010. This is an evidence-based framework to help us conceptualize the whole person. Well-being at Work explores the 5 key elements of well-being, and we're going to look at those and spend some time in them. Okay. The pandemic heightened our awareness of well-being, but it should have been heightened all along. And I hope we never stop keeping it front and center. I think it's changed us as people. It's certainly changed the generations that are up and coming. And well-being, you will hear more about, you'll see more measurements on it. And I think we all need to be contributing to it in a big way. All right, just some more numbers. I'm sorry that they are depressing. There are some good numbers, but a lot of them just really put the big focus on kind of the shock of where we are as a world. And but I think brings us into the fullness of we all have to work together to come to a better and fuller place of our well-being. 1 in 4 Americans report feeling a lot of sadness the previous day. That's when Gallup started studying where are we during the pandemic and how are we doing. 7 in 10 people globally are struggling or suffering in their lives. Now that's less in the US. That is a statistics that's global. Remember what I said earlier, some countries are, it's just devastating how much they're suffering. Others are thriving, but still as a world, we've moved into more struggling and suffering. I'm going to show you those distinctions here in a little bit. This one is heartbreaking, but we work in communities all the time. Some communities struggle more than others with suicide, but the suicide rate is a measurement that global as well as smaller organizations are keeping up with. And we have to keep that front and center, that the better the well-being of people, the more that the suffering of people can be lessened, and that we can help one another. Optimism and positive emotions can reduce the risk of heart attack by up to 50%. Okay, so physical aside, just being optimistic and having positive emotions, what a huge difference that makes. And so that's a part of well-being. Experiencing 3 times more positive emotions compared to negative ones leads to a tipping point. All right, so having 3 times more positive emotions in a day than negative is a tipping point to which we become much more resilient to adversity and better able to achieve things. So adversity even being how we feel mentally and physically, okay? Very, very important. And so we can do something about that in our workplaces, in the organizations we volunteer with. We got to make sure we're having more positive experience than negative. Happier people live longer. It's proven potentially adding 7.5 years to your lifespan. All right. So the world is in, and this is where I was telling you earlier, the world is in and has been on a negative experience trajectory for a decade. So it's not just been since the pandemic. The pandemic has added to it. All right. So this is interesting. Gallup writes about it. Lots of information out there on it. I just want to let you know it's there. Metrics, very important. I'd like to do this with you. These are some things that we can do with ourselves, but also with our organization. there's not enough in benchmarking well-being. And so Gallup is a big proponent of let's ask ourselves more questions. Let's find out where we are and do more about ourselves and about others in well-being. Let me give you some ways to measure well-being. This is just something I think is interesting. It's in the book about our best possible life. So George Gallup went out and was studying in the 60s, people that lived to be 100 years old. And so this was mostly people in Great Britain and the US. And he visited with all these people. I think there was like 250 people. And so this is a part of the best possible life metric. It's not to go back and live exactly as they did, but it's to be able to see the way they lived and the fact that we don't have to live extravagant lives. These, he called them oldsters, they said they had thriving lives. And when they talked about their thriving life, they enjoyed their work. They worked into their 80s. They prioritized their families and friends. They didn't go on extravagant vacations, if at all. They enjoyed living where they were and being around those that they were with. Now, I'm not discouraging traveling. I learn a lot from travel. But still, we can learn from them. We can learn from their simplicity of life. They were also very physical in the work that they did. So they didn't have to go out and go to a gym to work out. Now, we can't necessarily go back to those days, but we can see how important it is to be physically active, to get good sleep. And it's a huge part of well-being. I think this is very important, and I want to give you this information. It's in the handout that if you ask Tammy for it, you can get. The 5 essential elements of well-being. What Gallup found is that it was far bigger than physical health and well-being, that it was really having a purposeful life was number one, that having a purposeful life was foundational to all the other areas. So liking what you do every day, doing something that makes you feel like you've done something that was purposeful affects all the other components of well-being. Social well-being, meaning this is where your family and your friends are. You have a meaningful relationships in your life. Financial well-being, not about being wealthy, but by living within your means, managing your money well, okay? Not having stress in your life because you just don't have enough to live is a big deal. And so you don't have to be wealthy, but you have to have enough money to be secure. Physical, that you have energy to get things done, okay? And community, there it is. Community is a pillar of well-being. You like where you live, you like who you live around, and that adds to the purposefulness of your life. So those 5 things are essential to well-being. So I wanted you to have them, okay? Here's an assessment you can take pretty fast. Net thriving. So this is from studies from 1965 and still used today. The best possible life metric. So what I need you to do is either put it on a piece of paper. This is also in the handout, but think of it as a ladder, 0 at the bottom, worst possible life, 10 at the top, best possible life. On which step of the ladder would you say you personally feel you stand at this time? So either write that down or put it on a piece of paper. 0, worst possible life, 10, best possible life. It's a simple self-assessment. On which step do you think you will stand about 5 years from now? 0, worst possible life, 10, best possible life. Very simple assessment. This is what helped Gallup define thriving, struggling, or suffering. Thriving is well-being that is strong, consistent, and progressing in any particular element of those 5 elements. Okay. Struggling is if well-being is moderate or it's inconsistent in a particular element. And suffering is well-being that is very low and you're at high risk in any particular element. And then what Gallup has found is that if people said right now, present day, my life is about a 7, and if I think of myself in my future life in 5 years, I'm at least an 8, they say that is thriving. That is someone who sees themselves in a thriving life, best possible life. Struggling, we have a lot of people in struggling, and I did get the numbers. Let's see if I provide them on the next page. I did. I give you some numbers that Gallup, but these are things that you can pull out on for Gallup. 66% of people are doing well in at least one area. Okay. Less than 10%, this is globally, are thriving in all 5. You have to ask yourself why, and then work on one pillar at a time and keep building until all 5 are thriving. Okay. Remember this, having a purposeful life is the #1 driver of the other 4. Okay. So very, very important. All right, life purpose, well-being is most essential of the 5. Once you get life purpose going, your social well-being gets more intact, your financial well-being, your physical well-being, and then your community well-being. All right, Tammy, I'm going to leave you all with something to use. This is in the packet. But never forget that community is a pillar of well-being. But I want you to know that it is like on supercharged pillar, okay? Because community affects all the other pillars. Look at this. Life purpose, social, physical, and community well-being is essential in a healthy community organization and the work they do with the community, because we get our purposefulness from our community and from our community organization. We get our socialization at that community organization and with our community. Okay, sometimes we get physical. It requires you at least to be there and participate, but it is essential to well-being. And I just thought you all would love seeing this. What a big part of well-being that you are. This is in your packet. I won't go through it here so I can stop, but it's tying that strengths, people knowing what they do well and getting to use their strengths and what they do for others is essential to purpose, which is the first pillar of well-being. All right. Well-being involves all the things important to how we think about and experience our lives, and that we can thrive in our life if we keep those 5 components of well-being intact. Okay. Now, every now and then, absolutely, they can start to, well, something's not going as well as another, but being aware of those 5 elements will help us thrive. I put this in your packet. I didn't intend to go through them today, but I found lots of information out there from governments and communities that are working hard on well-being and bringing a fullness of resiliency and mental capital to the way they serve and work in their communities and take care of themselves. Okay, so that's in there for you. This is also in there for you. This is the way that the World Health Organization, 5 simple questions. This is how the World Health Organization assesses well-being, asking 5 simple questions. And so this is in your packet. I didn't intend to do it today. I just wanted you to have it as a takeaway. So you think about these 5 simple questions in terms of, I experience this all the time, most of the time, more than half of the time, less than half the time, some of the time, at no time. So first question, I have felt cheerful and in good spirits in the last 2 weeks. all of the time, all the way to at no time. I have felt calm and relaxed. Okay. And remember, in our last session, we feel pretty calm and relaxed when we're using our strengths in a purposeful way. All in the last 2 weeks, all of the time, most of the time, and so on. So I'm leaving that with you, and it's in your packet. It's a good way to just a self-assessment. Maybe you want to do it as a team, but to think about the fullness of well-being and how important it is. I want you to know it's been my delight to be here. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you to CCO and Cherokee Nation. Remember to let Tammy know if you'd like for her to send this to you. And if I can be of any help, there's my information. I put that on there too. Tammy, did we have any questions?
We don't have any questions yet, but if you have questions, we have plenty of time for Leanne. Well, we may have something. Can I get a copy? Yes, absolutely. I will share my email address, and all you need to do is just simply email me, and I will email you that on Monday.
You know what I did, Tammy, and everybody out there, and I just want to apologize. I started my last session on the top of the hour, and we started this on the half hour.
Yeah, you still have 30 minutes, Leigh.
When I looked at my timer right here, I thought, oh my gosh, we're running out of time. And so I zoomed you all through some things thinking I didn't know where I lost 30 minutes, Tammy. And I just realized it's because this goes till 4:30.
No problem. You can touch on some more if you would like.
I'm sorry I rushed you all.
We
But
have 35 participants that are still actively watching.
This might be a good place for me to slow down right here. Tammy, is there something in that chat or question that you want to ask?
Let me see here. Basically, they're just saying thank you for sending the information. They're excited to get the packet. Let me see about the chat. Good job. They're saying good job. But go ahead and please go ahead, Leanne. Take a few more minutes.
Tammy, I'm so sorry I rushed everybody. I did want this to mainly be a takeaway for teams to talk about, because it's really unlimited what you could talk about here. I found that, and so this was interesting to me, those of you that do research, when I looked at Gallup's information about like positive experiences versus negative experiences, well, that seems like not that big a deal. And yet when you realize that if you had 3 times as many positive experiences as negative, that you push yourself then into a whole new realm of resilience. You're making yourself healthier physically as well as mentally to handle the day, to handle the week. And so I was looking at what countries do best, and often you'll see New Zealand pop up. And I wasn't surprised, because I have seen over the years happiness studies that a lot of times it is it can be New Zealand, it can be like Denmark can come up. And what they find, it doesn't mean that they're walking around just being like, oh, Miss Jolly and all, but they set their life expectations and experiences into enjoying the simple things of life, enjoying one another, making sure that they like what they do. And they pull themselves over from, I'm going to have more positive in my day than negative. And yeah, I'm going to have some negative in my day, but it's not going to absorb my day. And so it's their outlook in life. So I wasn't surprised when I saw that the positive experiences, this is off the top of my head, but I think New Zealand is like at 79%. I think the US is like at around 66% is coming out for some reason. But still in the US, we're having more positive experiences than negative. But think about your community and your community members. What I was going to say about this is that I was looking for ways to promote well-being in the community. And I found so much from places like New Zealand, from Denmark, and not as much from others. And so anyway, I thought, well, let's use this one. I really liked it. It's very doable. 5 ways to promote community well-being. Now, don't forget those 5 essentials of well-being that Gallup's decades of studies have found, all right? That it's purposefulness in your life, social well-being, having people that you love and care about in your life and that love and care about you. All right, we'll go back through those. But it's number 1, connect. Connect with yourself. And I thought that was interesting. And you know what the metaphor to me that really works here is, you know, when you get on a plane and they tell you that if there's a loss of oxygen, to put your oxygen mask on first, and then the person beside you, even if it's a child or an elder. Well, why? It's because if I'm not healthy, if I'm not surviving, I can't help you. So I've got to get my mask on first. So make sure that you are taking care of yourselves, because your family and your community, they're depending on you. So put your mask on first, all right? And then you can turn and help them. Then turn and help others, but do not forget yourself. Help that team that works closest with you. So again, that's about self-mask. I got to keep my team healthy. I got to keep my family healthy. And then I can turn and I can help the community. And I'm saying healthy, but I mean that in the fullness of well-being. Being active. I love the way they put it, by physically moving in whichever way works best for you. Okay, so it means getting up every day. It's vital to well-being. So I don't have to get out and I don't have to run a mile. I don't have to run 5, but I have to get up. I have to participate. I have to be there for myself, for my family, for others, and for my community. All right. Keeping learning. Some people, you will have natural talents. If you do, I've gotten rid of my books, but if you do take the Clifton Strengths, if you do take that, I love it, I loathe it, just your internal assessment, move into your strengths. You'll find some of you are driven to learn more than others, but we can all learn a little. I think that means curiosity, that we have to get up and participate. We have to wonder about others. We have to be involved in some way. So when we learn, we develop ourselves, we grow, we keep our brains active, we keep moving. All right, so work that crossword puzzle. Be aware, notice the moments. This cannot be said more. Be intentional. So Oprah, I like studying her sometimes, the way she organized her teams. If somebody came in with a new idea, she would say, I love it. Let's start with intention though. What is our intention? What are we trying? What's the outcome we're trying to achieve? All right. So be intentional with your life. Be in the moment too. Don't be worrying about the past. Don't be too over anxious about the future. We do need things in context. We do need our futuristics, but we got to be in the moment and make things happen. And then helping others. And everybody talks about this in their well-being information. Gallup, Mayo Clinic, World Health Organization, small communities. it is proven time and time again in study after study that we get more from helping others than they get from our help to them. So however that is, give of your time, give of your money, give of yourself, your enthusiasm, give of your knowledge, whatever is possible to give it. And it makes you, it adds life to your years, right? It adds life to your years. Who wants to add years to life if you don't have life in the years, right? So I hope that's helpful to you. You can find many other things out there, okay? I do want to go back to this slide about the community, because this was just a huge aha. When I've been working on well-being in the last 2 years plus, it's always been for a tribally owned business, and they're looking at their organization, or it's been the fullness of a tribal government. I haven't worked specifically with a community that was focused to do work on well-being, okay? So I had not stepped into this thinking. And then it's even, I found the more awareness I had, the more information I found in Gallup's book, but in others, about talking how essential that the community is to the wellness of the people that live there. And it is because of the purposefulness that our community organizations add to the life and purposefulness of the community, but the lives and purposefulness of each person that volunteers in that organization, leads that organization, and those they serve. But also think about the socialization that every person gets by being there. It may be the best day of their week, and that's a beautiful thing, you know? So it's a very big deal. Community is essential to humanity. It is the first place that we remember being, and hopefully it's heartbreaking to think that some people sometimes grow up in places where they don't feel like they belong, but it's our first sense of belonging. And so even though I lived in Maryland for 20 years, I would tell people for a long time, they'd say, "Where are you from?" And I was in Maryland, and I would say Oklahoma, and then, or I would say Cherokee Nation. And yet then they would say, but you live in Maryland, you know? And I always felt that this is where I was from. And it's always where I would come back to, and that I would tell people I just breathe differently there. I sleep better there. That's community, okay? And that's that sense of belonging. Community organizations, you're the piece of the communities where people know they matter. I matter. I do something purposeful. I help others. And so it's just a big, big thing. So it just made me, I just had this big aha, oh my goodness. And I don't mean to put more on your shoulders, but what you do is so important to the people that you do it with, but those that you do it for. So Tammy, those are some of the things that I feel like I super rushed through, thinking my time had run out.
So there is a question now, Leanne, if I could read it to you.
You bet.
Where is a good place to start with acquaintances versus someone I am super comfortable with? ? I don't want to be offensive.
Oh, but to make more, Tammy, did you take that as like making more personal contacts, having richer relationships?
Yes.
Well, I think that's a wonderful question. And I actually think we should all think about that, because our community organizations have very specific purposes that they're focused on. And yet a part of getting to the fullness of that purpose, we need these volunteers, we need these folks, and we're serving the people within the community. So we need to be developing these relationships. And so I do think that the community organization, you are like a front line of, you're a place people can go to build deeper relationships with one another, and they can do it in the purposefulness. Let's say maybe you are focused on elders. You have a mission to serve the elders in your community. And maybe it's even more specific than that. Maybe it's to make sure that they're able to have the food that they need, right? So maybe it's some type of food service. So the wonderful thing about building relationships by being in your community organization is that I care about the overall mission, but now I know everyone serving in this organization cares about it too. So I already have one enormous connection with every person here. So I just think that is a huge, big deal. And I think it also gives me a way to connect with you, to maybe you do a particular part of the overall mission. Maybe you're the one that does the cooking. Maybe you're the one that does the ordering, but I could do that with you. And it's just a wonderful way to create a relationship with somebody because you're doing something more purposeful. So it takes it out of the abstract into a very purposefulness. And don't forget that. Don't work so hard in your organizations that you forget to create those relationships, right? Remember those from the last session? Yeah, you need to execute, and yes, you need to influence people, but you need those relationships because they're essential. And then you need to be the strategic thinking. You need to be strategic about what you do. Anything else, Tammy?
We don't have any more questions at this time, Leanne, but if you do have questions for Leanne, you're welcome. You can email her. I'm sure she will share her contact information, or you're welcome to email me and we will get those questions answered for you. And Leanne, we just appreciate you and appreciate your session today.
Thank you, Tammy. And again, thank you to the community organizations and all you do. It's enormous. It gives us a center. You're our centerpiece.
All right, Leigh, thank you so much. And we will be starting our next session at 5 o'clock. Lindy Conover will be doing community needs assessment under my facilitation. So we appreciate you so much, Leanne, and thank you so much for the session.
Thank you, Tammy. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.